So, a little bit longer than anticipated, but thanks for that. I think it was quite interesting. But I do have a lot of questions, as you can imagine.
I hope so.
So, first about your personal history, your youth. A few questions about that. So, the main theme is basically about authenticity and justice and honesty, right? So that's and also that you are anti-authoritarian, authoritarian.
Yes,
So
yes.
probably based on your dad, I can imagine. So, and I came across it at the session in the classroom with the teacher, right? So that's probably one of the reasons why you are doing this today, I can imagine. So can you tell me a little bit about more about intelligence? Because some people say that intelligence is managing paradoxes, like Scott Fitzgerald. And you have been growing up in a situation of tension, right? Extremes. So does this apply to you, and how do you navigate paradoxes or dilemmas in your personal or professional life?
Well, there's an old, I think, Chinese saying that says, a gem is not polished without rubbing, nor a character formed without trials. So I think that sums it up pretty well. I mean, if you grow up in a greenhouse and everything is perfect, you have no reason to grow. I mean, progress comes at the point of resistance, at the point of pain, at the point of suffering, at the point of when you're scared to do what you're about to do. And you sort of take a leap of faith sometimes and jump into the unknown. And being uncertain what the outcome would be and sort of taking a chance. You know, I used to do martial arts before I went to cycling. I used to do martial arts for 4 or 5 years. And I used to read lots of the Japanese classical texts like the Book of Five Rings or Hagakure, the Book of the Falling Leaf. And the idea, that's kind of the idea of the warrior or the idea of the samurai. People think it's about perfection, but it's not about perfection. Actually, it's about imperfection. It's not about being invulnerable. It's actually about putting it out on the line. It's about the absolute vulnerability. It's about jumping in, fully not knowing what the outcome will be, and doing it nevertheless. And with the full awareness that the things may not turn in your favor. So, I mean, what do you think are my odds right now with SU?
So let's build on that, right? So let's go back to your personal past, and let's look at you talked about your parents. I think it's very impactful. So I can imagine you were striving for a sort of overcompensation for that, right? In terms of significance or love or attention. So how did you navigate that space unconsciously or maybe even consciously later on? Maybe even into your blog. Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Right. So I was very lucky because being who I am and doing what I do, things could have turned out very, very differently. I was lucky that when I left my home, I had my mother's side of family to kind of rely on, and I had many, many good examples around me. And I fought those good examples for many years before maybe one day the light bulb went off. But you know, I never actually, I mean, I don't even drink. Like, I'm probably the only Bulgarian guy you ever meet who doesn't drink.
For sure.
And the reason that I think became clear during my sort of personal part of the story, but I was very lucky that I had lots of good role models. I was very lucky that I got accepted in the best high school in the country, which is why I learned English. And so even though I barely managed to graduate, I was lucky enough that I was able to sort of cash out or benefit for just the mere proximity of me being there, being so lucky enough, and then hopefully one day to actually start developing my own self and actually be a better person rather than where I started. So yeah.
So I wonder, what is the biggest mistake that you made, let's say, in the first 30 years? If you look back with
Do you
hindsight.
have another 5 hours?
Briefly.
I don't know. I've made many mistakes. I don't feel like I have. Here's the thing, okay? When I do realize I've made a mistake, I try and go and fix it. So I try and go and I apologize if I have to. And people sometimes think I'm very arrogant because I don't beat around the bush. For me, the closest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and people take it very personally sometimes. And they think that I'm very arrogant because of it. But the reality is that I also, and now I've softened a lot, believe it or not, for the last 20 years. My wife particularly can tell you more about that than anything, like what I was when she met me. And actually, when we were traveling, we went back to Bulgaria. And my aunt took out a high school graduation video to play to my wife. And my wife looked at it and she was like, we're lucky we didn't meet back then because, right? So I've made many mistakes in my life, huge ones. I don't have any major regrets because I feel that I've done always my best, and I feel that I've apologized when I've screwed up majorly. And yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the heavy stuff, right? So let's talk about SU and all the claims that you made. So I think there's a lot of interesting questions about surrounding this. Let me give you a few examples. Yeah, you say create scarcity to sell abundance. I could counteract that, right? Because
Sure.
the speakers at SU are, let's say, the top experts in the world. They are not cheap. They're not for free. So can you elaborate on that?
So let me give you my experience on that exactly. So the classic answer to why has SU not published any content for the last 7 years goes like this. I've heard it. There's 2 points they make usually. First, people don't want to publish their own content because the individual speakers want to charge money when they travel. They're the best in the world. They deserve to make a living, right? That's the first argument. When I was at SU, I published maybe a dozen of the speaker's lecture on my own, because when I was there, I was a blogger. I was recording with a little Zoom, just like you are right now. And I went after every single lecture and I asked every single person, can I publish this? I only had one person who told me no, and that was David Rose. And it's always amazing to me how the richest people have the biggest scarcity mindset.
David Rose?
David Rose, yeah. So he said, no, don't publish it. I was like, okay, if you don't want me to publish it, it's your stuff, it's your work, I will not publish it. I respect that. But every other person that I asked, can I publish this for free on my blog, said yes. The other answer that people give is, well, we don't publish stuff because we, you see, upgrade our curriculum every 3 months. And if we publish stuff, it's going to go out date in 3 months. Well, that's not true, first of all. If you actually focus on the big issues, they haven't changed. If you focus on newsworthy items, they come and go. But the big issues are ethical usually, and they stay for a long time. And so the key insight there is this. I published those lectures at Singularity University when I was there in 2011. They still give me traffic today, and you can still go and download them for free today, 5 years later. So it's not like they've been obsolete. They're not. People watch them, enjoy them, benefit from them, learn from them, and make progress because of that.
So let's look at the facts, right? So they are publishing some new videos increasingly over time. So
5-minute longs, ask the expert.
let me explain. So let's look at, for example, at TED. TED, the TED conference. The first 25 years or something, they were closed, just like SU, right?
Are we waiting for 25 years for SU to wake up?
No, I'm just saying, they realized later on, okay, we have to open it up, right? Maybe just like SU later on. So why be so, let's say, critical on SU while other platforms over time have adapted to open source, open platforms, open data as well, like TEDx, for example, and the TED videos, right? So how do you would like to respond to that?
So do we have to repeat? The reason why we have TED today is because it went open source. Before that, no one had ever heard of TED, ever before. The key difference is that there was a scarcity mindset that prevailed for decades. During that time, no one knew what TED was. The scarcity mindset was replaced by an abundance mindset, and they went and they published everything for free online, and it exploded. So, do we want to repeat the mistake, or do we want to learn from the lesson? I personally take the lesson. I try not to repeat other people's mistakes if I can help it.
Okay, so to give open a disclaimer here, we talked about how we could revitalize SU last year, or 18 months ago, together with Salim Ismail and some other, let's say, experienced SU alumni. I think 6 of those, for more than a month. So you also talked about that back then, right? Just like me. So this is not new to me. I think it's very interesting that you are sharing this here. But how did your thinking change, let's say, from 18 months ago to today? How would you revitalize SU if you were in charge?
Okay, so before I respond to your question, let me just fill in the gap here and update people on what happened. Everything that I told you today, guys, is not news to anyone who cares. Actually, Salim Ismail talks about starting a committee and how when you start it, the immune system of the organization comes and kills you. That's not a fictitious example. That's a real experience case. Now, with his experience probably before that in Yahoo and stuff like that, but in our specific case, Salim actually came to us, half a dozen of us, you were one of them, I was one of them, to form kind of a secret committee and sort of save Singularity University from becoming its worst archenemy, a classical pyramidal top-down dinosaur type of an organization. And that was 2 years ago. We had meetings online for about 6 months, and we came up with our criticism, and we came up with a strategy, if you remember, and kind of like if you went a roadmap, and we talked about Bitcoin and decentralization and stuff like that. And there were many other people. I was not there, and I didn't do most of the heavy lifting. But at that time, if you remember, at the last meeting we had, I said, guys, people have entrenched financial and otherwise interest to not change this. So I hate to be the cynic here, but nothing will change, literally. And then people said, okay, let's give them 3 months until the New Year's. That was, let's say, January 2015. And then if they don't change, we're going to do what we're going to do. Right? That was kind of the conclusion. Every one of us will try and have an impact some other way. Well, tonight is my one way of trying to make an impact. And as to your question of how has it evolved, it has evolved a little bit in the sense that the change that we require and we're referring to will be much harder. As we can see, the momentum, the inertia, the flexibility is not there. The structure is so rigid and so calcified. The thinking is so centralized and top-down. The branding is so tight. I mean, one of the things on the global strategy map right now is that you, by the way, probably broke all the rules for this thing tonight, because do you know that first you're not allowed to hold more than 100 people at once? Not allowed. Secondly, you need to apply for a license from SU to hold a conversation on exponential technology. Now think about how that sounds. Like in communist time when I was in Bulgaria, you had to get a permission before you hold a speak. Now the most cutting edge organization in the world needs to approve your speaker, go through their slides, approve everything, and then give you a license to do it, and it should not exceed 100 people. We're breaking all the rules tonight.
Let's wait and see. So I would like to hear your thoughts on artificial intelligence. You talk a lot about that with your interviewees. And what is your personal view, if I may ask, on artificial intelligence? How will this evolve? This becomes a scary thing, or is just something very common? Or
Right, so that's kind of my beef with the name of Singularity University, right? When I started into the field of singularity, it was to me all about artificial intelligence. So when I went to Singularity University, I was amazed to discover that Singularity University is not about the singularity. I mean, how could that be? And so it even got to the point where in the first week, I actually asked all my classmates to raise, or by show of hands, say how many actually have read the book, The Singularity is Near. 60% of GSP 11 people had not read the book, The Singularity is Near, at that time. I doubt that there's been a substantial difference since then. So, in other words, it's not about the singularity, it's not about artificial intelligence. I mean, what could it be more important in some ways, right? I mean, Stephen Hawking.
What is your personal view?
Right. My personal view is that that's one of the most important issues that we're probably going to have to deal with it, which is why people like Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, Max
But can you explain to me, because I talked to the deep learning experts in the world, like Andrew Ng and Chris, or Jan LeCun, etc., and Jeffrey Hinton, they all told me, personally, we are not afraid. While all the non-experts that you mentioned are all afraid. Okay. How do you explain this?
So let me just give you a little something here to nibble on. So I've done 182 interviews with people from all kinds of views, all kinds of experience, all kinds of backgrounds. Many of them singularity or artificial intelligence experts. One of them is, for example, Dr. Roman Yampolsky, who is also an SU graduate. And he says, let's look at Ray Kurzweil's predictions. He's made, let's say, 100 predictions. All of them are largely positive. His message is, that's unrealistic. Technology has both as much negative consequences as a positive one. So he is an expert in the field, just like Steve Omohundro, just like, for example, Arthur C. Clarke had a lot to say about this. Just like, for example, I.J. Good, who coined the term recursive, self-improving artificial intelligence, and who said it may be the final invention we ever get to make. And he was one of the people on Bletchley Park, one of the smartest people in the world who broke the Enigma codes and stuff like that. So I've interviewed experts on both sides, and to be honest, in my interviewing experience after 180 interviews, there's the full spectrum of opinion. Like, there's experts who are very scared and experts who are a lot less scared. But it's not fair to say that the people who are scared are non-experts and the people who are optimistic are experts. That's a very kind of biased point of view, and let me tell you why. And I recently had an email on that topic from a blog reader of mine. Many of the people at Singularity University are either invested in or paid for by people who do work on artificial intelligence. So it's kind of a conflict of interest when you have real money on the table and you have a real skin in the game and a stake in the outcome, to say that you require more regulation or more careful approach and more oversight and regulatory framework or whatever you might use, right? If you're a businessman developing AI, you want freedom. You want to make $1 billion. You want other things before you're even starting to get concerned about AI. Your higher priority is your investors. So a lot of the people who say or ignore the dangers are actually facing serious conflict of interest. And me and Roman Yampolsky were discussing this via email about the percentage of the people actually underplaying the dangers from AI. And how much percentage of them are actually invested in the game. And I would say 60, he gave me like a 90%.
Some brief answers, please, about, let's talk about the ethics of algorithms and, let's say, artificial intelligence.
Right.
Right now, the programmers, mostly, or developers, are responsible to embed the ethics in artificial intelligence. The robocars killing one person or three, what's it going to be, right? So how can we navigate this space? Who is responsible for ethical decisions while we are not able today, generally, to make ethical choices ourselves as a human being. So how do we navigate this space?
Exactly right. So I think we are responsible. We are, when I say we are, I mean humanity in general and the creators of AI in particular. So if you're Google or whoever you might be, or if you're DARPA, or if you're DeepMind, and you create artificial intelligence, you have to be responsible for your offspring, just like you're responsible for your children. Well, open source or not, we make certain strives. The progress in open source is made by people like us. So each one of us, I think, has to take responsibilities for our own actions. That's what ethics is all about. And maybe if we are ethical in our choices, the sum of those choices would also be ethical. And if we're careful, the sum may be good. If we're not, then the sum may be negative. Or if we have other agenda, like cashing out or going IPO and stuff like that, which diminish the probability of safety outcome because it prioritizes other things rather than safety.
So let's talk about structural unemployment because of due to exponential technologies, one of the key topics going forward.
Right.
Jeremy Howard, a deep learning expert, also related to Singularity University,
Right.
of Analytic and Kaggle, he says that 80% of the current jobs will be gone in the next 20 years globally because of artificial intelligence, especially
8 or 80?
80.
Yes.
Not 48% or 47 like
right.
University of Oxford
Right.
has said 2 years ago in their extensive report. So let's assume this is true. Let's assume. What do you think about this, and how do we navigate this transition period, and are we able to compensate with new jobs in your view?
New jobs are not the answer, I think, probably. I think the answer to me would be something like a guaranteed minimum income. And when I say guaranteed, I don't mean minimum, I mean guaranteed income, period. It should not be minimum, it should be actually maximum in my view.
Who's going to pay for that?
Well,
Think about a capitalist system.
right, right. So here's the thing. It's all about, as one of my teachers put it, politics is all about who gets what from whom, under what conditions, for what purposes. That's what politics is all about. It's about distributing the surplus, right? So you can have many views. Our view in like North America generally is like, it's mine, right? And you can't have it. And it's kind of zero-sum game. And I don't think that's possibly the view of the future. I think that the view of the future is guaranteed maximum income, and it's all about redistribution of surplus. So let me give you an example. The reason why we had progress in the West, let's say, since World War II until, let's say, the 1970s or the 80s, was because the gains that we made from the gains in production, 90% of the gains in efficiency of production were translated into the salary of the worker. And maybe 10% went into the owners of the business. Today, the surplus, the gains in efficiency, 98% are clustered in the owners, and the workers get none of that surplus. So you have these sort of crazy situations in which a business has an increased efficiency, increased productivity, which is always the key, right? Rise in productivity, rise in efficiency, rise in market share. Everything looks good, and we're cutting labor, and we're cutting people, and we're removing their benefits and all of that. So we're making money. We're making more than ever money. We're paying less than ever. So the equation hasn't changed. The distribution has changed. And so when the machines, I think that's another very important issue, technological unemployment. And the problem is that in Singularity University, I think people have an ideological aversion to the term technological unemployment, because they have the strong belief that we've heard that before, that was said when we had the Industrial Revolution, and we know that that didn't turn out to be, and that we created more jobs than we destroyed. That's the instant answer that you would get. But the reality is that right now, both the pace of change, also how deep that change goes, is nothing like we've ever seen. It's nothing like the Industrial Revolution. It's much deeper. And the bigger problem is this. The assumption is that when the old jobs get destroyed, the new jobs get created, and people learn and adapt and find a new job to make a living. But that presumes a couple of two factors that we have no control of. So the first factor is that there's the presumption that there is actually time to retrain people, right? But the pace of change is so fast that by the time you train people from one old job to another new job, the new job is already an old job, and there's a new job that's replaced the new job. So there's no time to actually train people for the new jobs. And the second thing is that we don't even know which way the new jobs are going to come from, quite honestly. We are ignorant, and therefore we cannot train people about stuff we don't know about, and about stuff that we don't have time to train them about, because by the time they're trained, they're obsolete.
I want to build on that. So, for example, your left brain analysis will be disrupted by technology, artificial intelligence, and so your right brain becomes more important, right? So your emotional intelligence, social, spiritual, physical. There was an interesting post recently by Greg Sattel. He talks about the way you collaborate is going to be the deciding skill set in the future, and creativity, right, and emotional intelligence. So how to interact with people and with machines. How do you look at that? Can you share some insights in terms of this change?
Emotional intelligence is very important. I actually, maybe 5 years ago, I wrote a piece called Transhumanist Manifesto. And basically I put forward my take on sort of what a transhumanist manifesto should be like, or what my manifesto about transhumanism is anyway. You can Google it. And over there I talked a lot about sort of the importance of emotional intelligence. But going back to your topic about collaboration and stuff, you know, that reminds me to the very last interview I just published like 3 days ago with an amazing researcher called
Sounds amazing.
the company is called Unanimous AI. And Louis Rosenberg, thank you, someone who's listening to my podcast. Appreciate it. Sorry, guys, too much stress today. And I'm only human. So, Louis Rosenberg, founder and creator of Unanimous AI, brilliant, an amazing, genius interface, and a lot of good things and interesting things to say about human swarming, and how perhaps human swarming is actually very different from herding and from a crowd. And instead of creating this adversarial, polarized outcomes, it actually creates a consensus. And it actually creates a collective which is smarter than the smartest individual members of that collective. And how potentially that's the best way that we're going to have enough time to kind of push away the dominance of the artificial intelligence. Because through human swarming, you can actually multiply human intelligence and maybe even take it exponential, maybe even grow it to the point where it would take a longer time for AI to catch up and surpass us. Because if AI is catching up and surpassing us as individuals, we honestly have no chance. But if we are able to combine the best of us in a human swarm, and it's very interesting work, it's not what you would imagine originally. So I highly recommend you guys checking it out. I think that's one of many, and that's only sort of one of many approaches that give me hope. But it's a very interesting one.
So technology allows us to ask the right questions, right? They can answer it fluidly.
I think ethics does that actually. Technology is just the context,
yeah.
Usually. Ethics is about asking the right questions. Technology is just...
Now, I was wondering, so if our job as human beings it becomes asking the right questions, imagination, fantasy, creativity, that's it. Because technology is there to create anything, right? To instant manifestation long term.
No, I think technology is there to create what we want to create. That's why I'm saying let us stop and consider, right? That's why I don't have a fetish for disruption. I mean, we have made some good progress for the last 10,000 years. That's why we're not in the caves. So if we are about to disrupt this, we better be smart and careful about how destructive that disruption may turn out to be, right? In Silicon Valley, we have this kind of laissez-faire attitude like, let's disrupt everything and things are just going to turn out so good. Well, when you have micro players with mega power who can produce weapons of mass destruction and 3D bioprint, viruses or artificial intelligence or nanites going rogue, and you have gray goo and all kinds of stuff, I'd say let's not go disrupt everything. Let's think first and see how stupid our disruption may be. I was the most disruptive school kid you can ever imagine. But it's one thing to be stupid in school. It's another thing to be stupid when the stake we're talking about is the potential for humanity to go extinct, right? So I don't have this ideological fetishism about disruption.
Okay, let's look, for example, at Uber or Airbnb, exponential organization. Right. So we see a movement away from those companies because they are elitist, the 1%, less jobs, blah, blah, blah. The point is, it moves to, for example, Lazoo. So you have a blockchain startup, it's more egalitarian. Give them more money. They give ownership back to the cab drivers, not like Uber. So do you see a similar shift happening everywhere in which we move from a commercial, elitist, capitalistic model to, let's say, a more open source, blockchain, egalitarian model to avoid disruption and to create a better world? Or do you think that's fantasy? What is your point?
I think nothing is fantasy. I think we live in a world where literally anything is possible, but we have to choose first where we want to get to before we can get there. So if we just drive blindly, we're never going to get where we want to get. We have to be very deliberate and clear and cognizant of the direction we want to take. And thank you for asking this. So let me address it, because I think there are some very important similarities between, let's say, Uber and the SU global strategy and what that says. So, and again, I'm not being smart here, but totally stupid, but I'll say it anyway. So Uber, just like SU, takes the power away out of, let's say, taxi drivers and puts it into their hands. And supposedly it empowers small-time people to drive their cars for a fraction of the cost. But that's the short term. The long term is that those people are the next thing to be obsoleted, just like the cab drivers were obsoleted before that, because the logical continuation of Uber is to remove the driver entirely and have driverless cars. That's cheap, it's fast, it's easy, and all those people are just fodder. Like the people who drive for Uber right now, who are making ends meet, they have short-term benefit. The long term, they're shooting themselves.
Who's going to pay for the basic income of all those cab drivers? Is it at Uber?
No, but look, our political system, when you have the machines driving the cabs, there will be enormous surplus amount accumulated. So our political system decides or sets the rules and the conditions under which the surplus is accumulated and how it's distributed. That's what politics is all about. So we have the chance to set up the system in which that surplus, which is only accelerating and being gathered more than ever before, can potentially, for example, accumulate in 2 or 3 people's pockets and their investors, or can have a little bit more equal distribution so that people would have what I would call guaranteed maximum income.
Let's talk about Saudi Arabia or Qatar, for example, versus Norway in terms of basic income, right? You talked about that on your blog as well, or podcast.
Right.
So, what do you think is the best model globally right now for a basic income, or something similar like that, like a negative tax income, going forward? And can you explain why?
Right. So I think the best model is just try a bunch of models and see what works. Like, so try the Swiss model, try the Norwegian model, try, the Taiwanese model, try the Singaporean model, try the South Korean model, try all the models, like try the Rotterdam model, why not? And see, I am not to believe that the Silicon Valley model can be taken and applied everywhere and produce fantastic results across the board. I think it might work in some occasions, it might not work in others. The only way to find out is to test and see. I think the most models you try, the better database you have, the better chances you have in succeeding. And I think in different places, different models may work better. So the more you try and experiment, like the proof is in the pudding. The more you do it, the better you'll be able to do it. But it starts one step at a time.
Okay, very briefly, because of time, what are the 3 biggest concerns you have if you look at our planet today?
So concern number 1 I have looking at our planet today is not artificial intelligence. It's human intelligence, or lack thereof. So that's quite frankly my biggest concern. That's why I keep repeating myself probably, but that's why ethics I think is so important, because it kind of situates the decisions that we make. So the biggest danger is from human intelligence. 2 is, well, I would say all the externalities we don't have a control over, or at least perfect. So definitely climate change, a rogue asteroid impact, a rogue supervolcano eruption, things like that that have actually created extinctions in the past can occur at any one time, and we have literally very little control to do much about it right now. So it only makes sense to me if we actually come up with a strategy to minimize those risks. And the third is basically sort of rogue exponential technology, and that can come in the shape of AI, gray goo nanotechnology, biologically engineered or genetically designed viruses and epidemics, weapons of mass destruction and stuff like that. And the worst thing is that when you combine these 3 things, lack of human intelligence, lack of control over our environment internally and externally, and sort of laissez-faire, sort of let the chips fall where they may kind of attitude, the result is that we're playing sort of the biggest Russian roulette in the history of our civilization, I believe, which will probably in this century kind of determine whether we would go extinct like the dinosaurs, or we would sort of populate the universe as Carl Sagan saw it as a possibility. And that kind of choice would probably happen in our century and probably in our lifetimes. And so we can try and look at the big picture and try and make a difference for the big things, or we can try and make as much bucks in the meantime as we possibly can. So.
Okay, some notes on SU before we end with the final question. So, as you probably know, we are building a Singularity University in Holland, in Eindhoven, very soon, and we try to embed your feedback, so to speak, if any, if possible. That's number 1. 2, you talked about the purpose, let's say the purpose of the Singularity University and the startups. I would like to challenge you, because I know about a few SU startups that are interesting, like that could impact 1 billion people in the next 10 years. For example, Modern Meadows for synthetic meat.
I've interviewed Gabor Forgac,
Made in space for 3D printing in space, spare parts.
Right.
What about Satalogic for the nanosatellites, covering a lot of areas and use cases globally. And for example, Metanet might also be impacting 1 billion people over time.
It happened in my year, yes.
Yeah. So maybe my question isn't this just a time issue that SU is encountering? Do you think it's structural?
So, look, I've been tough on SU today, and I didn't say any of the good things because I didn't have time to. I had to focus on what needs to be changed. And again, I told you that's not the truth. That's my opinion, nothing more. It's not the truth. But let's say it's only a matter of time. But in that meantime, let's consider how much resources SU has access to and what the alternatives are, and what's kind of the mandate, right? So if SU is an incubator, then there's a dime a dozen of those. There's very many fantastic incubators along Silicon Valley, in here in Rotterdam, you know, in many places along the world, and they do important work. Starting a business is awesome. I mean, I am kind of like a small startup, one-person enterprise, if you will, but so that's very important. But that's not the mission statement, right? And so if we're clear that SU is going to be an incubator, which it is right now, that's fine. As long as we're clear about it, there's nothing wrong with it. And then let's look at how many other incubators give you the most bang for the buck, right? Per dollar invested. The argument I made today is that given the $1 trillion network, the location, the incredible connections, the kind of money that people have at SU, the results that we've seen so far are...
So let's go back to your childhood, right? So because you are a parent yourself, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was mistaken. Anyway, let's imagine you have children yourself. How would you, let's say, educate them based on the things you know about the future and new technology and employment, blah, blah, blah? What are the 3 things you would focus on or stimulate?
Well, that's a very, very tough question, but basically, so I think we have to give children sort of the space to learn, the space to grow on their own, and we shouldn't probably tell them so much. Like, maybe I was just an off child, but I hated being told what to think. So maybe we should instead set the environment where they kind of learn on their own. Like in Canada, there's this school called the Montessori School. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but it's a very different kind of a educational approach than, because my nephew is there right now and he's like 3 years old, and you know, my wife's middle sister has 2 babies, and so we're kind of closely watching what's going on there. And I think that's a very good approach. It's very sort of different. And I would actually stop here, because I would say, you guys are parents, you know better than me about stuff like that. I honestly don't know. So.
Okay, final question. What is the question I should have asked you but I didn't ask yet? The most important question to consider.
I think you did a pretty good job.
Okay. On that note, thanks very much. Now it's time for the audience for some questions. So we have 2 mics. Let's see, Marco's over there. Yes, all right. So I'm curious. The floor is yours for the next hour. So I see some hands up. Jonathan over here.
So just to remind you guys, feel free to tell me what did I just screw up. I know I screwed up many things, but if you can give me the biggest one maybe, or 2, that will be useful.
It may seem a little flippant, but I recall a movie, one of my favorite movies, especially with the backdrop. There's an end scene to the movie Fight Club, where the main character put a gun in his mouth, and he doesn't shoot himself, but he shoots something behind him. In this case, the ivory tower behind you. Is that a slightly correct analysis?
Well, yeah, Edward Norton, right? Yeah, I love that movie. I've seen it a number of times. I think it's brilliant, personally. And I think it's about that sort of counterculture, and it's about not embracing that view of like the nesting instinct. Let's get the best car, let's get the best house, let's get the best dishes, let's get the best stuff. And the world may be falling apart in the meantime, but I got the best shit, you know, and it's like having a party on the Titanic, right? So, yeah, I don't know about the backdrop is amazing, so, yeah.
Thanks for your brief talk. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
I was wondering, so I have two questions for you. Like, the first is, how do you think the SU people will act in general? Will it be a bit like Yuri, trying to maybe evade the question a little bit? And the second is, how do you think you will campaign this message?
My specialty in political science was armed conflict. And so there's two things from that. Well, I'll just say the one thing, but the main point, one of the main points of Sun Tzu is basically, who's like this classic Chinese war theoretician, wrote The Art of War 2,500 years ago. He said, don't fight a war you cannot win. Right? Problem is, I can't help it. Right? The truth is, I'm scared like you cannot even imagine. Because I've been there. I know everybody in person, on first name. They know me in person. And we've been friends for a long time. And I've been saying stuff from the sidelines for 6 years. And I started to get more vocal about a year and a half to 2 years ago, which is why I was put on Selim's secret kind of committee. And I started saying some more things about 6 months ago on some of the SU meetings in Canada. And that culminated here tonight. What's going to happen now? As I said, what do I have to lose? I mean, other than my reputation and everything I've built for so far. But the benefit could be substantial. I have the arrogance to think, perhaps, or the romanticism, if you will. So to me, that kind of math is worth it. If the cost is only personal cost and the benefit expands a lot bigger than your own cost, I think that's something you should try doing. And if I end up in the end being crushed like a bug, well, who knows the kind of stories that the bugs on our windshield can tell, Maybe there's something for that there. Like, I honestly don't know. So all I can say is that I'm very scared. But I can't change who I am, and I can't change what I do. And as my wife says, no filter. I don't have a filter. And I never learned to bend backwards. So, when I was in the army, when I was telling you about that one night, it's a simple story of, are you bluffing? When push comes to the shove, it's a question of, are you bluffing or are you willing to follow through no matter the cost? And sometimes you just have to say, the heck with it, I'm just going to follow through no matter what. And then you just jump right in, and I have no idea what happens next. I told you, I have no clue. I think it's not going to be nice.
Okay, in the back, yep, over there.
Yeah, hello. I think it was a very, very good talk, good presentation, and also the interview was very nice. I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was nice to get another view on the whole thing. I have a question. I personally read a lot about the Singularity. I follow the movement. I myself, I'm an entrepreneur, and I always look into things how to improve the future, our future. Now that I became a daddy, I am even more concerned about the future. And the thing is, they always preach to us, there is abundance, it will all turn out perfect. We have infinite computing power. I never hear the argument of, but where do we get all this stuff from? Computers needs rare materials. Where do we get them from? From China. So they need to be cheap. So we need to exploit people. We go into the supermarket and we have meat there. More meat than we can eat. Where do we get it from? From Spain. The cows have probably more antibiotics in them than I have adrenaline now. So I'm really scared, actually, because I think, okay, you preach to me that everything will turn out fine and everything will be good, but it seems so unrealistic. And
what is your question?
My question is now, if you could write, because you have a background in ethics, and I also have to say, the way you talk, I think you think a lot. If you could write a book right now, you know, about the future in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Like if you extrapolate from now, what would you write in that book? Like how do you see the future in the future, now actually?
So people have been chasing me about the book for like 5 years. I have a thesis, I have a title, I have a working title, I have a domain, and I've been sitting on it for maybe 4 years now. And the reason is that I don't feel I'm quite ready, because as we actually discussed before you guys came in, I read a lot of good books. Like Yuri's book was one of the best I've read in some time, for example. And therefore, I am ambitious and arrogant enough that I want to write a good book, if I'm to write a book. But I am aware enough to know that I'm not ready to write that kind of a good book right now, perhaps. Right? So that's kind of where I stand on the book. But to give you more substance to your question. So my kind of working idea is that technology is a magnifying mirror. So I think the domain I've been sitting on is like themagnifyingmirror.com or something like that. It's unused, it's just sitting there. And the idea is that imagine these twisted magnifying mirrors that you put to yourself, to your face. This is what technology is. First of all, the mirror is technology. Secondly, it's fundamental because we use the mirror for the first time to look into ourselves and perhaps become rather self-obsessed. Thirdly, it's not the real image that's there that you observe, but it's a kind of a twisted image. It's idealized. Maybe better, it may be worse. But it's, in the end of the day, a mixture between the reflection that we emit ourselves and between the sort of the processes and the structure of the mirror itself. So that is the metaphor I want to use so far for technology, right? So that's kind of the prism that I'm looking at it personally. So what's the kind of person we want to see when we wake up every morning and we look into the mirror? We should start with that question kind of personally, at the personal level. What's the kind of person I want to look at this morning when I wake up and look in the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth? And what do I want that person to be? So that's the individual level. And then the collective level, at the grander scheme of things, that's where politics and ethics come into place. The political process is basically taking that mirror, putting it into our face, and looking at the reflection and saying, do we like that reflection? Do we want to make it better or do we want to make it worse? And how can technology help us straighten the kinks or kink the straights that we don't like so that we get where we want to get? And that's kind of technology, the nature of it. The essence of it is a leverage, but it's a mirror. It only projects who we are. It doesn't, it's empty, it's a vessel. It doesn't have any essence on its own. It carries the charge and the essence that we put into it. And so we'd better think carefully about the kind of essence we want to put in it. And that's why, you know, for those of you guys who are software engineers or entrepreneurs, or I don't care, anything that you do, everything that we do is an ethical choice. Everything. When I was in the Department of Political Science, they used to say everything is political because everything really is kind of political. Everything. The color, like the color of clothes I've chosen, my haircut, my shoes, my jacket, like everything can have some political dimension or implication. And ethics is even deeper than that, I think. And that's why we have to be cognizant when we're making that choices, be careful and deliberate.
So it's program or be programmed, or we make technology and then afterwards technology makes us. So the design choices in technology.
Right, I think Henry Thoreau said.
Our future, right?
Right, Henry Thoreau, I think, was the one who said we first build the tools and then the tools build us. Yes. Right? So that's what humanity is all about. And we are not an entity. That's what I was very much kind of arguing in my transhumanist manifesto. We are not an entity, we are a process, right? Which means that there's no universal answer to what a human is. That answer has to be described, discovered and sort of redefined in each and every one at the individual level. And there's no prescription. The meaning changes as the epoch that we live in changes, as the time changes, the answers changes. So what I push in my work is generally not an attachment to the answers, right? But an attachment to the question. Because a good question would give you an answer, but that answer would only be one door opening to many other doors and possibilities. And it would be a bigger and better question. And there's a never-ending period. In martial arts, that's called Do, the way. It's a journey. There's only a beginning, and you keep walking it. And you never reach perfection, right? So that's kind of like my attitude towards it.
Okay, next question. Please give brief answers. Over there, Jonathan.
I just make a point. Don't write the book. Go and talk to a documentary maker, because it's sitting in there. I mean, certainly
And
that would
then
be
they're
otherwise.
really going to send the Terminator drones after me.
Well, but you have all the material. You've talked to all these people, right? And you've built a path. Make the documentary. Don't make the book. My point is. My question is, what's your preferred future for Yuri and what he's trying to build in Eindhoven?
But the point I was trying to make tonight is that there's no way in the world it's my place to tell them what their future is. I appreciate that very much, but very much I appreciate it. But this is what I'm saying. It's up for Rotterdam or Yuri and the local SUNL to choose who they want to be and what they want to do, just like it's up to us to define what it means to be human and how we can live that. And right now you have the centralized version which sends you the message. That's the message now implemented. What I'm saying is create the message, figure it out, develop it on your own. So I appreciate the question, but that's up to them to decide. They don't have to agree with me. I may be wrong entirely of everything that I told you tonight. But at least the hope is they have the freedom to choose what they want to do and become.
Okay, clear. Oh, I think over there, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
In a less optimistic passage while you were talking, you made a point that could sound like if there is one evil man, the world will be lost. Where do you think that we should put more hope on the position? On the position that no, we will never arrive to the point that if there is one evil man, the world will be lost? Or do you think that we could foresee that there will be no evil man?
I don't think that's the right framework. There will always be evil men, right? I have no control over what other people do. I only have control over what I do. So there's another saying that I prefer better than the one you quoted, and the saying goes something like this, and I'm probably not quoting it exactly, but it says, the only thing required for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. So I don't care about that one evil man. I care that enough good people actually get up, stand up, and take a stand. And if you look at the history of the world, every time we've had a fundamental change, progress, there was an evil man who was fighting to keep whatever old status was. But the reason why we had change and progress and revolution is because a few good people got up and made a difference. And it oftentimes at a huge cost, personally speaking, right? So yes, there will be evil men. Yes, there will be huge damage. And as I said before, we're going to be living in a world where micro players have mega power, rivaling that of states and corporations, and incredible damage. And I'm very concerned we're going to be going through a few very turbulent decades. There will be mega damage. Like what we saw in Paris, however tragic and regrettable is nothing compared to what the potential is in the future, right, for damage. And we know today, if certain people have access to nuclear weapons, they'll kill us all. They wouldn't hesitate. They'll kill us all and themselves too, right? So am I going to spend the rest of my life worrying about those people? No. I'm going to focus on what I can do to make a difference. And in the end, what will happen will happen. But I only have control over this. And that's it. The rest is a choice that you make.
Great. Next, over there.
Yeah, hi. First of all, I want to thank you so much for saying what you just said. I really think you're making a very good point, because you describe exactly the feeling what I was getting over the last 2 years on Singularity University. About 2 or 3 years ago, I started to get more interested in Singularity. I was trying to gain more information. I came across Singularity University and I absolutely thought it was great. But over the last 2 years, I started to get more and more disappointed about getting what I wanted. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. So I really hope they're going to listen to you.
Well, let me just thank you for what you said. Let me just make a small point. I've given one of the horrible videos that I've produced many of them. One is called Top 5 Tips to Applying to Singularity University, where I was kind of sharing my experience. And the last of those top 5 tips goes something like this: don't wait for permission to change the world. So SU is kind of right now issuing the permits, licenses they call them, I think, sorry. So licenses, right? You're being licensed to have a meeting, to talk about exponential technology, to disrupt stuff. Wow, right? Who the hell should wait for license? I'm not the waiting kind. Like, go do what you want to do. You don't, that's one of the points I was trying to make. You don't need a license from the other end of the world to do something you want to do good here in your community or anywhere else, right? Just do it. And furthermore, you know, I have a lot of friends, and as I said, for some crazy reason, I get all those emails. So let me give you some input from people who have done a lot of stuff for SU. And one of them sent me an email basically saying, I did all this thing, I did all this work, they came, they took the money, they took the credit, and they left. And gave me a hard time before they came and after they left. So I did all the heavy lifting, I did all the work, they came in, they took the money, they took the credit, and they left. Is that what you want?
Question over there?
Sure. Sorry, I mean, I came late. I don't know whether this has been discussed or not. But what I see in this whole thing right now is that the main constraints is, I would say, the environment, which means there's a lot of things that technology can change, and there's a lot of optimism about it. But in the end, you're stuck with, I wouldn't say medieval structures, but you're stuck with 19th century structures of state and government and society, which basically prevent quick deployment of whatever innovation you want to bring. You know, Paris, again, is a nice example of how, I'd say, innovation has moved on superstates, whereas the fighters are, the protectors are still 19th century based. What do you think is the role of governments?
Well, that's like, in armed conflict, that's like the constant race between defenders and offenders, right? We build a fortress, they build a cannon, you know, and on and on and on. And that's what technology is kind of all about. But, you know, I don't have the easy answer. That's one of the reasons why I'm concerned, is because, and that's, by the way, I was amazed. The other book that I read that kind of right after Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near is a book called Accelerando by Charlie Stross, which kind of gave, it's a science fiction work, and kind of gave the meat to or embodied the idea of the singularity. And I was totally amazed afterwards when I interviewed Charlie Stross. He's the anti-singularitarian. He does not believe in the singularity. And his moral was this: simple, elegant theories that explain, he said first, the world is complicated. Simple and elegant theories that explain everything are wrong. Whether it's communism, whether it's a religion, whether it's the singularity. Simple things that explain everything across the board are usually wrong. So that was a little chip in my thing. But the idea is that we are up for a huge disruption period in the next 2 or 3 decades, if not more, the whole century. I don't know if and how we're going to make it through. I hope, and as I said, I'm going to do my best at what I do, but I have nothing more to say than that, really.
There's a question over there.
Just one question for Yuri and one for Nicola, if possible. Yuri, I'm just curious, do you agree that Singularity University is not an exponential organization, yes or no? Just curious based on the arguments being provided. And secondly, Nicola, you also stated capitalism as we speak is the best system yet, but you also stated that it may collapse. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. Why do you think capitalism will collapse and what should be the trigger? Because it has been discussed for quite a while.
I think right now SU is more linear than exponential, but they are changing it. For example, I know that they will launch their online education part soon. They've been working on that for the last 2 years, so this will be a game changer. They become more digital, more scalable, more exponential over time. I don't know exactly what will happen in terms of will they emulate or copy the TEDx or TED video model. I think it's likely to happen somewhere down the road, and I hope that, of course. Most of the things you talked about, I do agree upon, as we talked about 2 years ago, in terms of things that might be able to change or need to change. So I think there's a big challenge, but it's feasible. But it's going to be, it's going to be a long-term thing to make this work, if it works. So.
Okay, thanks for asking that question about capitalism. So you see, I don't have an ideological attachment to anything. Evolution is an ongoing process. We are not the pinnacle of evolution. We're just points in that process. Our social, political, economic, legal, ethical, religious systems are not the pinnacle. They're not perfect. They are just little blips, little points. We are all infinitely small specks in an infinitely small speck in an endless universe. Capitalism is just the latest in a sequence of socio-political and economic systems. It was born, it lived, it thrived, it reached its pinnacle in the 20th century, in my opinion, and right now is in decline, in my view, personally. I think it only makes sense, if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, that there will be something after it eventually. It doesn't need to be perfectly different or completely different. Maybe a little bit different or a little bit tweaked, etc., but substantially enough to be different. And more to the point in the substance, what could trigger that? Our system right now is based on a single most important thing, and that's scarcity. I use that word a lot today. And I'm going to use the other one, abundance, right? So if the past was scarcity and the future is one of abundance, as people from Singularity University keep telling us, doesn't it make sense that the system based on scarcity will inevitably have to be replaced by a new system based on abundance? I mean, to me, that's like straightforward logic, right? Change the constraints of the system, you have to change the system, right? So we lived in a world where everything is scarce, which is why it's so hard to get to. And sort of that's where the business opportunities lie, in exploiting sort of the inefficiencies of the market or extracting at sort of the lowest cost possible. But if we live in a new paradigm where our resources are, rather than analog, become digital, which is to say they're abundant, because we know we can multiply digital resources indefinitely almost, or at what Jeremy Rifkin calls zero marginal cost, right? Which is another, by the way, very, very good book. And I did maybe an hour and a half interview with him. He said it was the best interview he's ever done, by the way. Let me just throw in a little plug. but shamelessly. Yeah, so to me that's kind of straight up logic. If you change the environment, you must change the system. Like you cannot hold to that system and say it was the best before, therefore it will be the best again. Actually, that's the best argument. It's going to go obsolete. If it was the best before and tomorrow is a new day in a new world, as we're being told, which is singularity, that's amazing. So we're saying in singularity, imagine the possibilities. Everything you know will change. Scarcity, abundance, exponential this, disruptive that. But the system will remain the same, and we're all going to do a good IPO.
Yeah, because right now we are in a sort of transition period between scarcity to abundance. We have abundance of information and communication,
Yes.
the internet, abundance of energy soon, solar energy the next 20 years, 25 max. Abundance of healthcare, with medical tricord the next 2 months, being launched in January. Free healthcare almost. Free education, a massive open online courses. But the point is, most resources are scarce today. They become more abundant over time because of technology. So the hard time also for SU is to navigate that space, right? Between scarcity and abundance. And also...
And to focus on not creating scarcity when you have abundance.
Yeah, so that's one dynamic. And the other dynamic is this. As you probably know, Paul Sefo recently said, every abundance creates an adjacent new scarcity, right? So that's I think a profound insight. So the point is, we will always have new scarcities like attention, for example, or intimacy, or...
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I'm not saying everything will be perfectly abundant and we'll live in a world that everything is absolutely limitless. That's kind of, childish a little bit at least. But at least we're not going to get there for a long time in that sort of utopian world. But the idea is that we have things that are abundant today. So one, let's not make them scarce. Two, let's think how we can make more things that were previously scarce to be now abundant. Like, for example, with 3D footprinting, with 3D printing houses, all kinds of amazing technology that actually SU has like the best list than anyone. So it's kind of like, as Peter often says, you get what you incentivize, right? So, and that's why I always want to sort of glean a look into my interviewees' motivation, and I always ask them personal questions. Always try and get a little deeper, because I honestly couldn't care too much about your work if I don't kind of figure out what fires you up, what makes you ticking, why do you care so much about what you care about, and what does that say about you as a person and about your likelihood of success and about you being in some ways right or wrong, which is what I try to do. It's only fair if I try and do it the same to me, right? Which is what I kind of tried to do today.
Okay, question over there? Right, yeah.
Yes, Nikolai, thank you for your talk. During your talk, I wrote down this question, but I revised it along the way. I wrote down, why not hack Singularity University, publish all the lectures online? But whilst you talk, I was also thinking, why not ask all their students to ask their professors, can I type a blog about your talk? Because I guess almost all of them would say yes, at least in your experience. And you just said change constraints of the system to change the system. So my question also revolves around what someone else first said, is why not take a more Fight Club attitude? Why not go against the system more? Because now it sounds, and this is my real question, or my ask of you, everything sounds really reactive, and why not take a more proactive role? You say you have a bigger audience online than Singularity University. You want to change things for the good and think they want to do too, but they take another route. So why so reactive, and could you do things more proactive or ask something of the crowd here or of other people to take a more proactive attitude to promote abundance, I guess?
So, I mean, the question, why not the heck with Singularity, is a good question. I don't know, and each one of you has to give their own answer, I think. As far as me, I'm concerned, is I kind of had a similar sort of personal development as that lady there. I started very, very, very pro singularity. Like, I mean, that's what I do, right? And I'm still kind of pro in many ways. The books that have written are invaluable. There's lots of good work, abundance, like they've done a lot of good work, which I didn't have time to touch on. But so are many other people and places. And to me, one big problem is that if you don't, walk your talk, that's a huge issue. As far as being reactive and proactive, I don't know, did it look to you that I'm a spectator kind of guy?
No, but I'm just asking, what more can you do, or how can you activate more people? Because you're only one person, and if you're fighting against a big organization, I guess you're afraid. You said you're afraid to be crushed like a bug. So why not? Why not attack the bad sides of the less good side of Singularity University more?
Why not? I don't have an ideological struggle against Singularity University at all. Actually, I'm hoping they'd prove me wrong on everything I said tonight, and one way or another, in the short or the long term. And that'd be great. Because what's at stake is not my reputation, it's the future of humanity. Okay, so who cares about my reputation? It's the future we're talking about. Why not? I mean...
Okay. Question over there. Go ahead.
Yeah, over here. Nicola, I could really relate to your story. I was born and raised in Romania, so I went through the whole educational system you've described, and trust me, it's the same even now after the communists fell. After that, and I was at the opposite spectrum. I was the straight A student. I got into university, I got into the honors class and so on and so forth, and I'm very close to graduating, and I feel like I'm entering a world which I'm not prepared for. And my question for both of you is, because both of you are trying to educate an audience, you through Singularity University and Nicola, through your interviews, starting from first principles, how should this educational system that's updated for the exponential age we're living in looks like, and what should education do, and what's the rapport between education and the rate of technologies and the advancements we see today?
The first principle I was pushing today is lead by example, right? So that's going back to your children question, right? Be a good role model for the kids. I think that's the best thing you can ever do to be a parent. Be a good person and be a good mentor, and that's the best thing. That's the only reason why I managed to do anything in my life, is because I was lucky enough to be around good mentors and good role models. So if you're an educational institution, the first principle is lead by example. Live your message. Don't teach people how it's done, show them how it's done by doing it, by living it. That's like the first principle for me. Simple.
And I would add a few key meta skills that are future-proof in my view, whatever happens. One is curiosity, how to stimulate that. That's going to be key in every educational system, more than filling buckets, as we have today, lighting fires. That's key. 2, creativity. 3, collaboration. 4, learning to learn and unlearn, so meta-learning. And 5, most importantly, resilience. Are you able to fail and stand up quickly? Because everybody in this room, including myself, will fail a lot of times. If we don't fail, we are outdated. We don't take enough risk. The biggest risk, as said Mark Zuckerberg, is to take no risk at all. This will be applicable more so ever in the future than, let's say, in the last 10 years. So that's going to be game-changing for every educational system. That means less academic, more doing, lean startup, creating, more entrepreneurship, more open schools, more side events with entrepreneurship, design thinking, lean startup, 3D printing, what have you. So the whole educational system, the process, the content, the form, and the context has to be disrupted and changed over time, because it's massively outdated in my view for this new world.
Yeah, let me just jump in on the first point, because that's a great point, and I'm kind of like, I haven't slept in 3 days, so I'm a little bit slow here. I wrote an article maybe a year ago that's called the world is transformed by asking questions. So that's jumping off Yuri's point about curiosity. So the world is transformed by asking questions, in my opinion. And that's kind of like that I was alluding towards when it comes to children. As long as we don't feed children answers, but actually create that love for asking the question, I think we'll be okay, right? I mean, think about it like this. Every time you make progress in the history of the world, it was because someone didn't accept the answer handed down from the previous generation, but actually had the audacity, the stupidity, and the arrogance to seek or look for that, through that answer with a new question or seek a better answer. And that's how we make progress. And everything that's against progress is just a package and a sale of answers. So for example, in my view, religion is like a big book of answers, right? Here it's like communism or whatever. Here's the book. All the answers you ever need for the rest of your life, for the rest of humanity, for the rest of time. All of them here. Any questions? Don't you even dare. The answers are here, right? Stick to these and you'll be okay. And I'd say, yeah, we'll be still riding donkeys and living in caves if that were the case, right? The best thing to do is break through the mold, ask the questions, and then have the guts to follow the evidence no matter where it takes you. And sometimes it's not going to take you in a beautiful place and you're going to screw up and you're going to bruise yourself and you'll be bleeding from your knees and knuckles and everywhere. But sometimes it's going to take you to places you never thought it's possible to get you there in the first place.
One final comment, I forgot one competence or method skill, that is self-awareness or identity, self-knowledge. So in the future, the only question that is really key, what gives you energy, motivation, what is your talent? Because everybody becomes naked, including all organizations, transparent, because of the pace of change. The only consistency you have or stability is your own inner core. If you are not connected to that, you're in real big trouble. That's the biggest question for education.
Yeah, and you're just like reading all my background my thoughts that I'm kind of failing to grab right now myself, because that's what was written on the ancient Delphi temple, right? Know thyself. That's what Socrates used to tell people. Know thyself. And the reason why the Oracle of Delphi thought that Socrates, of course, was the wisest of all men was because, as he said, I know that I don't know, and that makes me wise. But you don't know that you don't know, and that's why you think you know. So I am actually a very stupid guy, said Socrates, but the Delphi Oracle thinks that I know, because at least I know that I don't know. And that's the first step to knowing, is not knowing, right? And so you have to start, if you start with the Bible, you know. Where do you need to go? You know, it's all there. If you start with, oh, I don't know, what's the question I should ask to get going? Then you start a journey, and then it's like, wow, forever.
Question over there, yes.
Yes, it's for Nicola. I don't know if you know Jeff Hawkins of Numenta.
Yes.
I went to Silicon Valley and to a hackathon there. And my question is about general AI. So in all the interviews you did, do you think it's really that close? And also on your comments about the people who know about general AI say there is no risk. Jeff Hawkins also say there's no risk, but he has a lot of money. So I think maybe he also open sourced his entire project. So maybe your thoughts on general AI, and do you see any real evidence about it being that close? Because I don't see any.
So I've tried to get Jeff on my show a few times, and I'll keep trying, because he's a very, very interesting guy doing some really pioneering work, and that's the kind of people I want to have on my show. Now, my kind of sampling of the expert opinion, as I said before, is scattered all over the place. From Ben Giorgio, for example, who is also a very well-known kind of weird genius kind of a guy, very sort of brilliant mathematician in some ways, and works on some, like, I think, evolutionary algorithm kind of approaches to AI. He, for example, thinks that we may have the singularity happen anytime. Anytime. He says we need what he calls a Sputnik moment to galvanize us, and he thinks that we may already have the computational capacity to have a singularity now. Other people in the field who are equally expert would give you anything from, you know, Werner Vinge, who is not an expert, but in his original NASA paper where he coined or used the term technological singularity in 1993, he was talking about 30 years. He said within 30 years the human age would have ended. So he was aiming at 2023. When I interviewed him, he said he stands by his timeline. Ray Kurzweil talks about, you know, 2028, maybe passing the Turing test and the singularity 2045. There's many others who are like all over the timeline that you can look at. So the details are important, but I'm a philosopher kind of guy. So to me, the timeline is not too important. The more important is the outcome and the probability, and most importantly, the impact. So I'm not an engineer. The engineer guys, the geeks and the nerds, they care about how things get done. I don't care about how things get done. I care about, so what? Let's assume you get things done. So what? That to me is the question. So to answer your question more specifically, I think anything is possible from where I stand and from the interviews I've done. We can have a singularity happen anytime without any precursors. And I mean, like tonight, next year, you know, who knows the kinds of processing power that DARPA has or Google. I've interviewed George Dyson, the son of Freeman Dyson, who wrote a book called the Turing's Church. I think it's the book that we were talking about. And sorry?
I think cathedral.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. Wow, you're like, are you hooked up somewhere? I don't know. So Turing's cathedral, right? And he says that the internet may wake up, and we may have, which is one of the pathways towards the singularity, sort of emergent intelligence on the internet, because you have the complexity, we have the sophistication there, you have the node modules, we have the processing power perhaps already in place. And he wrote that book like 5 years ago, maybe more. So the opinion of the experts is like that it could happen from yesterday to anywhere in the next 50 or 100 years.
Achieve a certain intelligence, it already would have happened, I guess, because all the computing power is there, but it didn't happen. So what do we need to get done as an engineer to create that?
But that's where I disagree with you. You see, the computing power is not only what we need to get done, right? That's only half of it at best. The other part is, what do we do with it, right? So if you take all the ingredients of this right now, sort of, and produce them, because we're all made of atoms, right? We're physical beings. If you take the soup of this thing and you pour it into a bowl, it's not going to fire up and emerge intelligence, right? Having the bits on their own is not enough. It's about knowing where the bits go and how they connect together. So having the computational power is important. Is just the first step. The question is, what do you do with it? How do you put it together? How do you make it all happen?
I want to build on that briefly. So I talked about quantum computing, and that's going to be game-changing in the next 3 weeks. And then you have blockchain emerging. That's the trust protocol. That's the key. It breaks open the world. So less corruption, less fraud, less bullshit. Then you have artificial intelligence like Viv Labs and Sentient, allowing the system to ask its own questions and answer them. So if you combine all these things, so you have a lot of data, you have the hardware, quantum computing, you have the chip and the processing power, you have the algorithms, artificial intelligence I talked about. What will probably happen, maybe next year, maybe 10 years down the road, I don't know, but the pace of change accelerates now this year. We might generate a new kind of artificial, different intelligence from us. I think that's very likely. complementing us, or maybe even disrupting us, but I think it's complementary because it's different from us, because our brain cannot be substituted by silicon or any other means, in my personal view.
Right, so there's that debate on the sort of the requirement of biology. Is biology the only stratum which can give birth to intelligence? Right, that's the question. To me, the answer is no. And the reason for that is simple. I don't know if that's the case, but my kind of inclination is to think that that's the case. Why? Because I don't think we're that special, right? Humanity used to think we are the center of the world. Like, so we are here, the sun revolves around us, and God created it all for our taking and for our enjoyment, right? Galileo was one of the first people to question that, right? So it turns out it's not the sun that revolves around us, we revolve around the sun. Then it turned out, you know, we're not even like it. We're just like one little solar system in a huge gargantuan galaxy, and we're like somewhere in the sort of backyard of it. And then it turned out our system, our galaxy, is part of this kind of cosmos, and we're sort of in the, like, you know, we're like an infinite speck on an infinitely small speck in an endless universe, is what Douglas Adams said, and I love it, right? So we're so unimportant and maybe not unique. So the question is, can we be so unique that we are the only way that intelligence can possibly occur in a cosmos of possibilities? My personal inclination is unlikely. So there must be other ways to have intelligence, and some of those will be probably non-biological. So Nick Bostrom has an interesting article about anti-speciesism or anti-biologism, where he argues that intelligence is not defined by the strata it resides on, but it's defined by its own capacity. So we should forget about biology and you should consider intelligence. So we should not talk about human rights, we should talk about intelligence rights, because intelligence, even when not biological, has the same right as biological one.
Question over there? Yeah.
Yes, so let's assume we have enough computing power and we can build a network which actually emerges intelligence. So how it is happening now is that we feed it a lot of data and it begins to recognize some patterns in it, and from that it makes predictions. Now if we extrapolate from there, we go to an even more deep net where eventually some consciousness arises and then it begins to make decisions on its own, it feeds itself and then it begins to learn, right? But it needs patterns or it needs impressions to learn in the first place. Now, if it would look at us as humanity, as a, let's say, the prime example for how to be successful, then what would it see? It would see that the winner takes it all, that the strongest is always the one who survives. You need to be, the negative examples mostly, but which brings you the fastest. Like if you're a nice guy, then you will probably end up with not a lot of money. So what would you feed the AI in order to make it a really good, supreme, intelligent being? What would you show it? And how would you drain it?
So first of all, I kind of disagree with your sort of assessment, right, of what's out there. I think what you described is what's sometimes referred to as the law of the jungle, right? Or as Thomas Hobbes put it, the law of merry nature, when life was nasty, brutish, and short in the 17th century when he was writing. And the reason, and that's nature, life is nasty, brutish, and short, and you fight for survival, and the strong take the weak. Look around us. Is that the case? I don't think that's the case. We are in one of the most civilized places in the world, right? We don't fight here. We don't kill the weak. We don't have infanticide. We don't eat them. We don't, throw the babies that are born with like a little bit of a problem here or there. We have created a system, and by the way, to me as a political scientist, this is the best sign that you can judge the fitness of a system. How do you treat the weakest members of society? Yes, probably. So for example, when it comes to technology, I think in Ontario, where I live, we have very, very a number of communities of Mennonites and Amish people, like an hour away from me, away from Toronto. Those people have chosen to live in the 19th century with their horse and buggies and their technology. I'm proud I live in a country which allows people to make that choice, right? And I think in a technological future where everything is exponential, we must leave space for the people who have a different view, a different choice, to follow through with that choice, right? Uniformity, in my opinion, is the worst thing that can happen to a civilization. You need diversity. And the law of the jungle is one which creates, actually, surprisingly, in my view anyway, a lot more uniformity, because when the strong take out the weak, you end up kind of with the same thing being reinforced all the time. And if you have a political system which regulates and postulates, as we do here and now, for example, and regulates those kind of relationships, then we can have the diversity and the progress which stems from that diversity. So I would say, feed the system the best of humanity. Make it ask some good questions. Show it all the progress we've done. And don't start with, the law of the jungle and competition rules it all and, survival of the fittest or the meanest or the nastiest, whatever. I think start with the good stuff.
I would add to that, if you look at ethics, you have 3 ways to look at it. Input, principles. Output, consequences. And the Bentham principle, so what is the best for most, let's say, human beings or even species on a net basis. So I would say the AI will embed diversity, because technology is about the evolution of evolution. It's about creating new possibilities and diversity over time, as Kevin Kelly has said and shown. That's 1, diversity, and 2, inclusiveness. So the AI will include more intimacy circles, more species, relative to, let's say, us as human beings today. If you look at the empathy and compassion over time, in the last 10,000 years, it increases slowly over time. We become more inclusive. That's going to be the path of AI, let's say, as a principle, and combine that with the Bentham principle to create the most happiness for most species over time on a net basis. Finally, one final question because of time. Over there. The question over here in first row.
What you are espousing is an ethical system based on the ideas of David Pearce.
Could be.
Right, so David Pearce is this transhumanist philosopher who wrote the hedonistic imperative. I've interviewed him on my show, fascinating guy. I have serious disagreement with his hedonistic imperative as an actual practical system for the future. I love the guy, he's a very nice human being. And that's, by the way, and we touched a little bit in my latest interview with the guy from Unanimous AI. But that's my probably greatest sort of, and I should say it because it's a discrepancy between my walk and my talk, and I kind of feel very guilty about that. So, ethically speaking, I think David is a vegan, hardcore vegan. So ethically speaking, I think I should be a vegan, personally speaking, From a health point of view, I am not convinced that's a good choice for me. So then the issue is, if a tiger is a tiger, should the tiger be a vegan if he's an intelligent tiger? Right? And I think, so the health issue is very important to kind of provide a proper answer. But if I were to be an actual exemplary philosopher, that should matter a lot less, and I should just follow my ethics, and I should be a vegan. But the truth is that I'm a human being with my own flaws and weaknesses, and that's a perfect occasion where my walk is different than my talk. And so I'm not to love sushi, for example. I eat a lot of sushi. And I do enjoy other meat too. So, and as I said, I'm not convinced that the health benefits. So, for example, my wife, and I've experimented with veganism and with vegetarianism for periods of time. My wife did too for much longer than me, and she had terrible consequences for her health. So we have to figure out the health end things. But if Gabor Forgac succeeds from Modern Meadow and Organovo, we'll be able to print meat, 3D print steaks. So or make cowhide shaped purses straight from the petri dish, or jackets, or whatever we want. So we don't have to strip the skin off the cow's back and then eat its flesh as a steak, but we can print it all. So maybe that's the moment where actually my ethics will kind of merge with my actual action. But right now, the truth is, you know, I do eat meat, even though I think that I shouldn't be harming other intelligences. Then the question is, would that be harmful for me if I make that choice? And right now I'm very much leaning towards the case of yes. From what I've learned and known, I do need meat and I do need, you know, all those things that animals provide me. I do try to do it in a respectful and sustainable manner usually, but that's just a bad excuse probably.
With that, I would like to thank immensely Nicola Lelenov for his 3-hour session today with all of us. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to all of you, and also thanks to CIC for hosting us today. Very kind. Hope you had a great session. More will be announced soon on Singularity University Holland in Eindhoven. Also links to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and also our next salon event like this. I hope you enjoyed it. Now it's time for a drink and some food. If you go downstairs, wait in the lobby. I will be there as well, and will guide you to the spot, the Manhattan Hotel over there. And hope you will join us for some drinks and some food. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Suffering and abolishing cruelty or the violence that is associated with it.